Tonight, we take a closer look at the potential challenges to mental health brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Everything from forced isolation to economic uncertainty to the unknown of how long it will all last. It all takes a toll. Joining me now on Skype to talk about this is Dr. Suzanne Hollman, a psychologist and the academic dean and program director of the doctoral program in clinical psychology at Divine Mercy University. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Hollman.
My pleasure, Tracy.
So it seems as if everyone, whether they or a loved one, have contracted COVID-19 or not, have been touched by this pandemic. Can you talk about the impact that a crisis like this can have on our mental well-being?
Absolutely. You know, I think for most of us, the overwhelming majority of us, this is our first pandemic. So we're not quite sure exactly what to do with this. And so we've seen everything from increases in depression and anxiety and self-medication during this time. So I think the first step is to be just very aware of where you are in terms of what are you currently doing to cope. And that will look a little bit differently for every person that we encounter.
Do you have any suggestions for people dealing with the sudden changes brought on by this pandemic, such as maybe a job loss or other situations that can be disruptive to a person's life?
Yes, I think the first thing to acknowledge is to just be where you are. I know that sounds like a typical thing a psychologist would say, but you know, we have an expression in the field, you have to name it to tame it. So having a look around at your life, at your social support system, having a close look at what you are doing. Are there things that you are doing that are healthy? Are there things that you are doing that you could improve a little bit on? How are you eating? Are you trying to keep a good sleep hygiene routine? And are you overdosing on social media, information overload? What I would suggest with that, because there's so much information available, is that you set aside maybe just a couple times a day to check in on current affairs, but that you not spend the entire day, on media consumption, because I think that has more of an effect perhaps than a lot of us may think.
Yet staying at home also can be really tough for a lot of people to handle. Can we talk about that feeling of isolation and how to handle it in a healthy way?
Yes, so I think it's a recipe for stress, isn't it? The social isolation that a lot of us may not be used to, combined with what feels like a new normal, being around in sometimes confined spaces with people, even if it's our family members who we love dearly, they can sometimes, be stressful to deal with. I think making some time for yourself every day, through meditation or prayer. We know that prayer has a lot of health benefits. I wouldn't underestimate that. Prayer affects neurotransmitters, for example, dopamine, which in turn increases well-being. Making a little bit of quiet space for oneself during the day, I think, is very important. And really being aware of the cognitive, the physical, and the emotional impact that this could have on oneself, and taking steps to ensure that you really take care of yourself. A lot of us are taking care of other people right now, but you can't take care of someone else if you're not taking care of yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. Really great tips there. What's happening in the world right now, isn't just impacting us as adults, it's also changing life for children. What advice would you give parents on how to help their children process all of this?
I think the first thing is, again, check in with yourself, because children are masters at figuring out how we feel. Even sometimes before we know. So the first thing is to remain calm, even if you're anxious. Try and see if you can check your anxiety a little bit so that you don't transfer it onto the children, even if it's just for a circumscribed period of time. And then help a child identify how they feel. If they say that they're afraid or they're unsure or they're angry, give a name to the feeling. Again, name it to tame it. We know that the brain changes when we know what we're dealing with. And then secondly, I would normalize it. The child is where they are. Sometimes children are much more aware of how they feel than we are. And normalize whatever it is that they feel. Try not to argue back with them by saying to them, oh, don't be afraid. Of course they're afraid. Sometimes they're just better at acknowledging what we're trying not to think about. And then I would redirect. If you've spent a little bit of time there with the child, normalizing it, naming it, assuring the child that you're there for them, don't let the child spiral endlessly within that anxiety. Redirect, maybe go outside into for a walk if you can. If you can't, find an activity in the house that you could maybe do, but help the child redirect after acknowledging those strong feelings that they may have.
Oh, great advice. Thank you so much for your insight. Dr. Suzanne Hollman, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tracy.